What if I told you that the pain you've been carrying, those invisible scars from betrayal, failure, loss, could be the very thing setting you free? Sounds insane, right? But most people completely miss this, and Carl Jung knew it over 100 years ago. If you've ever been told to just move on or stay positive, this video is going to turn your understanding of pain, healing, and power inside out. You're seeing this because something in you wants answers, not just surface-level quotes or pretty affirmations, but real transformation. So stay with me, because what Jung discovered might be the closest thing we have to emotional invincibility. Imagine this: you're a child, pure, open, unguarded, and somewhere along the line, someone hurt you. Maybe not in an obvious way. Maybe they ignored your needs, mocked your dreams, or taught you that certain parts of you were unacceptable. And so, piece by piece, you built armor. You learned to hide, to perform, to protect yourself. And now, as an adult, you wonder why you feel so disconnected, so lost, why you feel like nobody really knows you. Carl Jung called this the birth of the shadow. Most people think of the shadow as something evil, darkness we need to avoid. But Jung didn't. He believed the shadow holds the very parts of us we've exiled, not because they're wrong, but because they were unwelcome. Think about that for a second. What if your sensitivity, your rage, your ambition, what if those weren't flaws, but banished parts of your wholeness? Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That means your unhealed wounds are not just sitting there quietly. They're running the show. They're choosing your partners, sabotaging your goals, feeding your anxiety, all behind the scenes. Here's where things get deep. What if the key to not being hurt again, more boundaries, or cutting people off, or being stronger? What if it's radical integration? Because here's the truth. You can only be hurt by what you refuse to own. Let that sink in. When you reject your own needs, you become enslaved to those who withhold affection. When you disown your anger, you attract manipulators who provoke it. When you suppress your sadness, it erupts in moments you least expect. But when you integrate, when you finally face the exiled parts of yourself, you become whole. And wholeness cannot be manipulated. So how do you do it? Jung never left us in the dark. He outlined a path mysterious, but incredibly liberating. It begins with confrontation. You must willingly walk into the darkness, not to conquer it, but to understand it. Start by observing your triggers. Who frustrates you? What makes you irrationally angry or deeply insecure? Those are your signposts. Instead of blaming the outside world, ask, what part of me have I abandoned here? Maybe you're triggered by arrogance because you've denied your own confidence. Maybe you're triggered by neediness because you were taught that needing others is weak. These reactions aren't random. They're the shadow calling you home. Next comes compassion. This is where most people get stuck. They try to kill the shadow to fix themselves into worthiness. But Jung would say, you don't fix the shadow, you listen to it. This means sitting with your jealousy and saying, I see you. Holding your rage like a child crying in the dark. It sounds dramatic, but this is the work. Not pretty, not shareable, but profoundly human. Third, expression. Integration isn't passive. It's not just journaling and meditating. It's about giving your shadow a voice. That might mean standing up for yourself in ways you never have. It might mean creating art from your pain. It might mean letting go of people who only love the masked version of you. As you do this, something incredible happens. The world begins to change, but not because the world changed, because your lens did. The person who once broke you now seems ... human. The failure that haunted you becomes a teacher. The loneliness that crushed you becomes a doorway to authenticity. Here's the twist no one tells you. When you own all of who you are, you become nearly untouchable. Not because you never get hurt, but because hurt no longer defines you. Pain becomes data, rejection becomes redirection, failure becomes feedback, and fear becomes a compass. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not perfection, not eternal happiness, but a radical becoming. It's like rebuilding your house with every piece of rubble thrown at you. Eventually, nothing can collapse you because you've already used it all. Let's take this from theory to reality. Picture two versions of yourself. Version 1 is armored. You avoid conflict. You keep the peace. You shrink your truth to fit others' comfort. You're safe, but exhausted. Loved, but not seen. Version 2 is integrated. You speak even when your voice shakes. You set boundaries, not walls. You are not perfect, but you are real. And strangely, you start attracting people who meet you at that level. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally not hiding. And that S when it clicks. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you the same way again. Because you've stopped outsourcing your power. You've stopped waiting for the world to give you permission to exist. You've stopped looking for safety in other people's approval. You've become the authority in your life. Carl Jung didn't promise a pain-free existence, but he gave us something better. A path to wholeness so deep, so raw, that it dissolves the illusion of being broken. And maybe that's what we were chasing all along. So, if you're ready to stop running from yourself, To turn toward the parts you thought were unlovable, and to become someone who can hold the full weight of being alive without collapsing. Comment integration below. Because this isn't about avoiding pain. It's about becoming someone who transforms pain into power. And that's unbreakable.